Hello everyone, sorry for being a little bit late on our live show. We actually had some problems with our camera equipment that we usually do Facebook live streams with. It caused some problems over here at Facebook, so hopefully, or sorry, here at YouTube, so hopefully we will actually get that fixed before we do one next week or next month. We probably will be a little bit late on the next week side since we're going to the Chicago Auto Show starting on Tuesday. So we'll bring you all those updates live from that show. So let's just dive right on into the set of burning questions that everybody was posting over at facebook.com. So if we can find those. Let's see here. The first one was from Naveen, and he's asking why we were talking about getting a long-term RAV4 as our top pick instead of a Jeep Cherokee or some of our other favorites. The answer is easy on that one because Toyota sells more RAV4s than anybody does of anything else. So it's a pretty easy car really to include as a long-term vehicle in that way. And also our thought process behind what we're going to do with a long-term car, I think, is going to be a little bit different. Lots of other outlets there, Consumer Reports, etc., will buy a car or have a car given to them for a period of time, and then they'll talk about how much it costs to maintain and all that sort of stuff. That's kind of boring. We're not going to do that. So what we're thinking of doing is buying a car, owning it for, say, 9 to 12 months, something in that window, having everybody in the office drive it, have us collect their opinions on the car. That's pretty normal. And then every time we review another crossover, we'll do a would you buy A or would you buy B? What is it that you like about the RAV4? What is it you like about this alternative? And have it really sort of a RAV4, which is the leader, versus these other options in the segment. So that's kind of our philosophy with that particular one. And then the second question was if you had to pick best acceleration or best handling, what would you pick? I would pick best accelerating because you can fix handling a little bit better aftermarket. Garrett is asking if you qualified for state and federal tax credits, would you have still bought your Soul EV? If I had qualified for it, yes, I would have bought it over again. I think that's what you're asking for. So let me know if that's not what you were asking. Let me know down there. Will the federal government ever consider changing the minimum octane requirements to achieve greater fuel efficiency and performance numbers? It's America, so don't expect any government changes quickly, so probably not. Why do you think auto shows are on the decline from Elliot here? Some brands skipping out, etc. This seems mainly due to manufacturers wanting greater control over the launch event and exactly what's going on, what it looks like, what it feels like, etc. And I think auto manufacturers have been really quite clear about why they're doing this. They don't like the idea of being jammed in a hall with everybody else, and you only have 15 minutes or 20 minutes to make your big splash, and then the press moves on to a different event. So they want to be somewhere where they're the queen of the show the whole time. And they can do that if they do it on their own. And that's what we saw with the Ram HD launch in Detroit, the Explorer launch, the Supra launch, etc. They had events the days or weeks before the auto show where they invited the people they wanted to see out, and then they launched the car there. So I think that we really are going to be seeing more and more of that over time. Next, we have some questions about EPA fuel economy and CAFE. This is a whole group of people that are asking these particular questions, and I did promise to dive into this. So if you're bored easily at all, this would be the section of this video to skip. So let's talk about how EPA testing works. So we all know that when you buy a car, you get the Monrooney sticker. It's the sticker that's on the window. I probably have some here just sort of lurking on my desk since, oh, see, now we have a Ford window sticker with no fuel economy. That's very handy there. That one's too new. Well, I might not actually have any on me. But basically how this goes is the EPA has some testing profiles and testing cycles decided upon. But the EPA doesn't actually test everybody's cars. There's just not enough government budget for it. There's not enough time. So how this works is the EPA lets car companies do their own testing. And if that sounds, open to interpretation, then you're exactly right. There is some question about that. And then the EPA will then randomly check numbers to make sure that they jibe with what's supposed to be there. Over the last few decades, this hasn't been too much of a problem. There have only been a few corrections here and there. Now, Hyundai Kia Motor Group did have a large number of corrections in one decade, but aside from that, corrections are fairly few and far between. There were those Ford hybrid corrections about 10 years ago, etc. So the way that the EPA number, if this Monrooney actually had a number there, would work, would be a large number that is your combined average based on 55% city, 45% highway driving. And here's how those cycles go. So there are 5 different test cycles. There's the city test cycle. Top speed is 56 miles an hour. The average speed is 21 miles an hour. It's an 11-mile test loop. There are 23 stops and 18% idle time. That's not really what most people would see in city driving, but then it's meant to be an average. So it's meant to be representative of folks who live in really dense cities like Los Angeles or New York, where you're not moving anywhere in those 11 minutes or however minutes it takes you to have that test complete. Or perhaps people living in Kansas City, where there's a little bit less traffic and you're going to be driving a little bit more. It's meant to be somewhere in the middle. Then we have the highway test cycle, which is 60 miles an hour top speed. And I don't know very many people who drive only 60 miles an hour on the highway. Average of 48 miles an hour, 10 miles, and no stops on that cycle. Then there's a air conditioning test where the air conditioning is on, but you're driving sort of at highway speeds. And then there's a cold cycle where you're starting at 20 degrees Fahrenheit and driving along for some miles. That's a little bit closer to the city test in that cycle. Now, there was a lot of talk that these numbers weren't realistic. So in 2008, the EPA decided to change things a little bit, and they added an extra cycle. They added the high speed cycle, where you go 80 miles an hour, 48 miles an hour average, and it's slightly longer than some of the other tests, but it's only 7 miles long, and the air conditioning isn't on during that particular test. Then all of these tests are then weighted together, and that gives you the number that's down there on the window sticker. But things are more complicated because nothing with our government is ever easy. So manufacturers don't actually have to run all 5 of those tests to actually create their window sticker. They're really only obligated to test, generally speaking, the city and the highway test, and then they can use some formulas to create the effective total combined fuel economy number. And that's how some vehicles get much higher and much lower numbers than that combined cycle. Diesel engines, generally speaking, perform a little bit better in the real-world test than these particular cycles would normally indicate, whereas some hybrids tend to perform not quite as well, and it depends on the design of the overall hybrid. So that's how that all fits in there. There's all these weights and measures and factors. Now, the other thing that a lot of people were asking about was the corporate average fuel economy standard in America and how that incentivizes or disincentivizes certain vehicles. I've commented on that in other videos, so let's talk about it here. The government decided that cars should be more efficient. And again, because the government is the government and nothing is as straightforward as you might like, there are a ton of different formulas to compute the target goal fuel economy for cars. But the most important thing to remember is that when they're saying the pickup truck must achieve 30 miles per gallon by the year 2525, and people are saying, oh my God, the pickup truck could never achieve 30 miles per gallon by 2025, it's just not possible. The first and most important thing to remember is that that 25 mile per gallon goal is not based on the fuel economy that you will actually see on a window sticker on a car. It's based on the fuel economy from before 2008. Because in 2008, the EPA decided to change the way that they calculate fuel economy and update it for more real-world driving. And fuel economy numbers got, generally speaking, about 20% lower than before. Now, why they're not using the new fuel economy numbers for their fuel economy targets, no one really knows, but that's the first and most important thing to remember. And this has a pretty big impact. So, for instance, a car the size of a Honda Fit by 2020 has to meet 45 miles per gallon, and that sounds unachievable, or at least a great distance from where we are right now. But if you look at the current fuel economy rating of 36 miles per gallon, again on the window sticker, that's actually pretty darn close to what it's going to need in order to achieve that 2020 number already. Same thing goes for pickup trucks. Half-ton pickup trucks like a Ford F-150, Ram 1500, Chevy Silverado 1500, those would need to get 25 miles per gallon on average in order to comply with the 2020 corporate average fuel economy legislation. Well, they actually already do, because on their 2018 EPA sticker, they get 18 to 19 miles per gallon, and that translates into 25 miles per gallon for corporate average fuel economy compliance. Likewise, small trucks like the Ford Ranger, quite close to its final fuel economy achievement. Now, when I say that the laws incentivize and disincentivize certain types of cars, pickup trucks are an excellent example. A lot of folks are asking, why aren't there any truly small pickup trucks anymore? The reason is that if you actually had a pickup truck the size of pickup trucks in the 1970s, those small Toyota pickup trucks, small Nissan pickup trucks, etc., those trucks would have to have EPA ratings of in the 40 miles per gallon in order to actually be compliant under that law, because the law says that the smaller the format of the vehicle, the higher the fuel economy needs to be. The larger the vehicle, the lower the fuel economy needs to be. And the way the scale slides, it allows you to have a vehicle the size of an F-150 and only get 19 miles per gallon, but the moment you've moved down to those older size pickup trucks, all of a sudden you actually have to get good fuel economy, and that's the big problem right there. Oddly enough, it disincentivizes large sedans in a similar way, because the format scale, the top end and bottom end of these footprint sizes does not include a bigger category for truly big sedans, like a 1960s Chrysler Imperial, or even a 1980s large sedan. Just wouldn't be feasible under today's regulations, because it would have to have fuel economy that's a little on the high side. So let's move on to some of our YouTube questions here. They're scrolling out of control. Per new K900, you said you were sorry it didn't have the softer, plusher ride of the K9 in Korea. What does that I can look at? Sadly, you don't have very many options here. This is from Peter Gregg. There really aren't very many soft sedans in America, and that's one of the reasons that I said I was really sad that the K900 didn't retain the Korean market ride. And maybe I kind of wish that Kia hadn't actually allowed us to sample the ride in Korea versus the ride here, because it really was more comfortable. The Chrysler 200's not soft anymore, the Buicks aren't soft anymore, the Cadillacs aren't soft anymore. The Lincoln Continental is okay, but it's pretty expensive. You're pretty much just left with crossovers if you want a softer and more compliant ride, so that's quite unfortunate. Let's scroll back up to the top here. What are the top reveals at the Chicago Auto Show? That is a really good question, and I don't have my list in front of me, but I do know the Tacoma is going to be there. We also expect to see the Volkswagen GLI is probably going to be there. There are a few Nissan announcements there, but I haven't heard too much about them. Nissan has invited us to a few. Not entirely clear what they're going to be yet. Next we have my PJ's asking how much milk we can fit in any compartment. Oh, that's always handy. Yes, see, so milk containers are something that people know the general size of, so that's why we talk about it. It's funny, I always find it interesting that commenters on YouTube will oftentimes ask who's sticking milk cartons in their center console. It's not because that's where I plan on carrying my milk to work every day. It's because everybody in America knows generally how large a gallon of milk is, so you can visualize whether or not it will fit in a space. So there we go. Infiniti QX30, why no 2019 version yet? Will it be a reliable car? Expect a 2019 version. Manufacturers will sometimes wait a while to create a new model year vehicle. If something is going to change, they'll wait a little longer, and sometimes if nothing is going to change, but they still have a lot of inventory of the older one, then they may wait a little while to release the new model year. So not quite sure which it's going to be with the QX30, but it's one or the other. Probably not going to be too many changes in that particular model. Let's see here. What would you recommend as a luxury 3-row crossover? Nothing super expensive. That's an interesting question. There are a lot of really good 3-row luxury crossovers right now. I really like the XC90. It's not going to be the pinnacle of reliability, as most European cars won't be. Honestly, the new BMW 7 X5 rather, and the new larger crossover from them look very good. BMW can get quite expensive, but they typically have good lease deals. So if you're looking for something that's going to lease well, that may be an excellent option. If you're looking for a bargain entry, I hate to describe it that way exactly, but the Acura RDX is going to be an excellent buy if you're looking for something that's not going to break the bank. It's not going to be quite as snazzy, quite as comfortable as the Europeans, but it is going to be a little bit more cost effective there. Girlfriend bought a CX-5. They have a flat spot, and they're saying it will disappear over 1,000 miles. A flat spot. I'm assuming you mean on the tire. If it's a flat spot from the vehicle sitting for a long period of time, yes, it will disappear over time as the rubber just starts to bend around and get used to being in different positions. If, however, if you look at the tire and there's a flat spot where there's tread missing, then no, that will not improve over 1,000 miles, and you should probably get a second opinion. Here we go. Fook asks, do you work at a dealership? It'd be awesome if I could buy a car from you. No, I do not work at a dealership, so sorry you cannot buy a car from me unless you want to buy a used Kia Soul EV. I might buy one after its lease is over. So if you're looking for that one specifically, sure, but it would have to be the gray one that we already own. When will we have a BMW X5 review? That is a good question. I don't know the answer to. We always reach out to every manufacturer and ask when we can have their snazzy new vehicles. BMW has been a little bit late. We haven't seen any of their recently launched models locally available to us yet. So the Z4, the X5, the X7, etc., the 3 Series, those haven't been available yet. So hopefully they will be soon. News on an Infiniti QX60 redesign? No, but you would probably see that sometime after the Pathfinder gets a redesign. Let's see here. Mentioned that the Jihan is asking that we mentioned the RAV4 hybrid was more reliable than the non-hybrid due to less moving parts. It seems counterintuitive. Can you please elaborate? Sure. So as we've seen with Toyota's hybrids in the past, this is not based on a random assumption. This is actually based on reliability metrics from Toyota, of Toyota vehicles from Consumer Reports, TrueDelta.com, etc. A common misconception is that a hybrid is more complicated than a non-hybrid, and that's not necessarily the case. If we're talking about a Ford hybrid, a Toyota hybrid, a Honda hybrid, or actually a Chrysler hybrid, strangely enough, those hybrid systems are significantly less complicated than a traditional automatic transmission. There's simply fewer parts involved. So the way that those systems work is that there are 2 electric motors and there's a single planetary gear set. So there's a ring gear, a sun gear, and a little planet gear carrier. And that's all that there is inside that transmission. Traditional automatics have multiple gear sets. They have a lot of clutches. They'll even have dog clutch in order to engage reverse, etc. Hybrids don't have any of these requirements. If you want to go backwards in your hybrid, you simply spin the motor the other way. So there are just fewer physical parts and mechanical parts to wear and break over time. And Toyota has proved that the electronic components, the battery, the control systems, etc., are very, very reliable. Solid-state components just don't have a very high failure rate. So looking at that over time, especially the mechanical all-wheel drive systems and all that sort of thing, the traditional transmissions, they're just not going to be as long-term reliable as what we see in the RAV4. The RAV4 basically is a slightly sturdier, newer version of what we see in the Prius, and the Prius has proven in taxi duty in New York and San Francisco, etc., that it's very, very reliable. And related to this one, Kelly is asking what we think about a Chrysler Pacifica for a rideshare vehicle. I really like the Chrysler Pacifica Hybrid. I've said this before. If you're shopping for a minivan in America and you're not seriously looking at the Pacifica Hybrid, then you simply are not looking for the best minivan in America. The Pacifica Hybrid gets 50% better fuel economy than anything else in its category. The difference is astronomical. And there really is very little compromise. You lose the ability to fold the second row seats flat into the floor, but the Chrysler minivan was the only one that was able to do that in the first place. So if you delete that feature off of the Chrysler minivan, then you're just basically the same place as the Toyota, the Honda, the Kia, etc. It's also going to be highly reliable, likely. There were a few stumbles initially with the transmission, as you can expect in any modern vehicle, but just the overall design of it is likely to be reliable. And it's also worth noting that by all appearances, the transmission in the Pacifica Hybrid is actually being built by Aisin, which is Toyota's transmission company. So the same company that builds the transmissions for the Prius and the Highlander Hybrid and all of Toyota's hybrid and plug-in hybrid vehicles is also building the one for the Chrysler Pacifica. They're building it to a customized Chrysler design, but it appears to be basically that same transmission company, and they definitely know what they're doing with hybrids. So let's see here. Could you do a video on how to negotiate at a car dealer? I think a lot of other people have done better videos on that. I'm not sure if I could do that any justice. One thing that I'm always reminding people is that my interactions with car dealers are identical to your interactions with car dealers. I see the car dealer every 3 years, 2 to 3 years maybe, and that's the only interaction I ever have with them. So my love-hate relationship with car dealers is exactly the same as everybody else's. 2019 4Runner, someone's asking if we can review that. Maybe. I will try and see what we can find. It hasn't really changed since the last time we looked at it, so we'll see. Aldrin Ags asks, does Scotty Kilmer speak the truth? Ooh, questions about people on YouTube. I'm sure Scotty thinks that he speaks the truth. I would say that I disagree with some of the things that Scotty goes off on tangents on. I am not personally offended by some of the things that he dislikes. But then I've said that in videos, so you'll know that's just the way that it is for me. Um, you know, the screens that are mounted on the dashboard, sort of like tablet computers, I don't really see the problem with that. The logic mainly is that the screen is you know, closer to your field of view. So if your screen is lower in the dashboard, your eye line is up here while driving, not down here at the screen. And if you can move the screen up to that eye line, then theoretically it's safer. So that makes sense to me. Um, let's see here. Why do we choose not to show the 360-degree camera system in our car reviews if they're equipped with one? Actually, we generally try to, but sometimes the videos get really long. So when we're editing a video, if the video goes over 30 minutes, that's when we start pruning. And sometimes those shots of the 360-degree camera systems, those are things that are left on the cutting room floor, just because assuming that people don't want to watch an hour of me. Let's see here. Mazda 6, Optima, or Accord? That is a tricky one. I would say Honda Accord is my absolute favorite right now. Oddly enough, almost tied with Toyota Camry. I'm really torn on that particular cross shop. The Optima is an excellent value, very reliable. Depending on which version you're looking at, it's arguable that the Optima and the Sonata, which are related, could be more reliable than something like the Accord with its continuously variable transmission and turbocharged engine. So, you know, we don't know long term on that one. Mazda 6 is terribly pretty, but I think that in a lot of ways it just doesn't live up to that same standard that we see in the Toyota and the Honda, and to some extent the Kia and the Hyundai. I'm very torn on the Mazda 6 because it's very pretty. The new turbo definitely gives it some thrust that it needed. It's still not quite as fast as the 2-liter Accord or the 3.5 Camry, but it is very, very pretty. And beautiful looks are definitely a reason to buy a car. I don't think that anyone should be ashamed of saying, I bought the car because it looked really great. Sam Kyle dropped off the planet, didn't he? Yes, he did. He's focusing a lot on project videos. I know he hasn't had a lot of time for new car reviews, which is a shame. I really liked seeing him at events. He's a great guy, but unfortunately he has to do what's best for him and his business, and so that is focusing on project videos. As autonomous cars and car sharing become the future, how does the future hold for car reviews? That's an interesting question. I don't know. Maybe I will have to retire. But I think that day is a long way off. I don't think we're anywhere near seeing the majority of cars being self-driving in the US. It's going to be a long time until we're there. Let's see here. Someone's asking, I want something that is IHS TSSP but less expensive than current options. Headlights seem to be the issue. So I would say when you're looking at the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety and they're complaining about headlights, look deeper into the data and ask, why does the IHS dislike that headlamp? If the answer is that the headlamp is creating quote-unquote unacceptable glare to oncoming traffic, then I would buy that car anyway. Maybe it's not going to be as nice as a car that doesn't blind the drivers coming head-on, but because I'm selfish and I care about my view on the road, I would be less worried about that particular statistic than the actual view of the road. So I would be concerned about that's lighting my path so I can see, and if it puts up a little bit of extra glare to the oncoming traffic, then I probably would just live with that. What do you think of the new Jeep truck, and would you wait for the diesel? I would not wait for the diesel unless you really, really wanted a diesel. The reason for that is that the diesel is never going to save you money. If you're looking at the diesel for the money-saving part, no. If you're looking for the diesel because you want that incredible low-end torque, then sure, hey, why not? Wait for the diesel. Otherwise, I don't think that I would spend the cash. What do you think of 72 and 84-month loans? I would say it depends on the cost of the money, David. I'm not a financial advisor, but if the interest rate was super low, below prime, for instance, then I don't see a problem necessarily with that. But if you're paying 7-8% on a 74 or 84-month loan, then I probably would have bought a cheaper car. Any review for the new RAV4 Hybrid? Yes, we should have one soon. Let's see here. Someone's asking between a heavily optioned XC40 Volvo and an Acura RDX A-Spec, which costs about the same. If size does not matter, then I would totally get the Volvo. I think it is adorable. Uh-oh, someone said, oh, I nailed the pronunciation of someone's name. Wow, that's unexpected. Tuan is asking if I am an engineer of some sort which has a relationship with Tesla, why I haven't reviewed them. The answer is no, I do not have any relationship with Tesla. The simple matter is that Tesla does not lend cars out for review like other auto manufacturers do. So if I want to review a Toyota or a General Motors vehicle or a Honda, etc., I call them up and I say, hey, I want to review the whatever, and they send me a car, we review the car, it gets thrown back at them. If the car doesn't get a good review, 9 times out of 10 manufacturers aren't bothered by that. Like, I think that our recent reviews of Mitsubishi products was not terribly glowing. I think honest and fair was where we tried to be with those particular vehicles, but that didn't get us on a shit list with Mitsubishi. But unfortunately, Tesla can't handle any negative press, to be perfectly honest. Anytime there's anything negative about them, they get very upset. With other companies that have done reviews on those, they've taken the cars away early or never loaned them out again. So that's how that works there. Maybe we will have a review on the Model 3, maybe working with Redline Reviews on that to review their Model 3. We'll have to see how that sorts out later. Let's see here. If we had to invest in an automaker, which would it be? That's a good question. I think at the moment, it would probably be FCA. Although, don't bet against Tesla. Tesla seems to never do any wrong, so it's probably a good short-term investment, although I am not an investment advisor, so remember that. FCA, because they have no long-term debt. They actually are a cash printing machine right now, so I would definitely go with something along those lines. Let's see here. Do you think Toyota will bring out something practical again, like a Prius 5? A wagon would be practical and a better system than the Nero. I am not seeing that necessarily from Toyota. I see Toyota probably more focused on hybrid crossovers and those particular segment of vehicles that are hot right now. And the pregnant station wagon segment just has never really been set on fire. So Toyota being a very practical and pragmatic company, I think they're going to focus on segments where there's volume to be had. So maybe a hybrid truck at some point, but probably more hybrid crossovers. Let's see here. What fuel do you think is safest for the future of mobility? Batteries, burn, diesel doesn't explode, blah, blah, blah. That is a good question that I don't have a good answer to. I do like the thought of hydrogen, although hydrogen at the moment is being produced by primarily fossil fuel reformation, so it's really still a fossil fuel, even though theoretically there are zero tailpipe emissions. That could change over time, but at the moment it's not. Cracking water to create hydrogen and oxygen is very energy intensive, and that's why we don't do it in general terms as a society. So hydrogen reformation from natural gas is just simply cheaper. But in the future, that is possible. So you would be willing to give up that extra, consume that extra energy, so that way you could have a fuel mechanism of storing fuel for a long period of time for those longer journeys. We're contemplating getting a Hyundai Nexo, so maybe we'll talk about that if we actually do that. So let's see here. It's amazing that we don't have as many subscribers as Vehicle Virgins. I know, it is amazing, isn't it? But I'm not as attractive as the Vehicle Virgins, probably. Let's see here. I'll stop it with the Forerunner questions. They will never change. That is quite true. They probably won't. Nick is asking how the Durango 5.7 is holding up. It's actually been fine. It's probably going to go in for its first scheduled maintenance here soon. Haven't been any issues. No mechanical issues. The only weird thing that's ever happened has been the same thing everybody else has noted, is that infotainment systems just tend to restart now and then. And I think the only infotainment system generation that we have reviewed here at Alex Autos that hasn't restarted randomly while driving at least once on us is probably the Toyota one. The Honda ones, the Kia ones, Hyundai ones, the Mercedes, BMWs, so they've all, restarted here and there. So I don't think anything else is particularly unique there. But as far as the car, it's actually been lovely. Tows very, very well. What do I think about the 2020 Explorer Hybrid? What will it get with respect to mileage? That is a good question. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it's probably going to be slightly below the Highlander Hybrid, and I hope that Ford surprises us here with the 2020 Explorer. The one thing to note about the Explorer is that it's a very different hybrid system than what we see in the Explorer, than the Highlander rather. It uses Ford and General Motors co-designed new 10-speed automatic transmission, a traditional 10-speed auto, rear-wheel drive, and then the engine's in front of that. And then positioned between the engine and transmission is the electric motor. It's a pancake motor design. So in terms of overall hybrid system design, it is basically identical to what we see in the new BMW hybrids, only with the 10-speed auto. Those systems haven't been quite as high on the fuel economy ratings as some of the Toyota hybrids, but they are very rugged, and so if you're going to be doing towing, that's definitely the kind of hybrid that you want. And for the Explorer hybrid, tow ratings don't drop at all versus the regular one. Let's see here. What is the difference between radar and camera adaptive cruise control? It's basically the way that they're measuring the distance from the vehicle in front. So the camera systems use depth perception, basically computer-aided depth perception. So if you notice, if you only have one eye, it's a little bit more difficult to tell exactly what's in front of you, how far things are away. The cameras in the cars are working the same way. So they're taking two images, they're comparing them, and based on those images, they can tell how far away the car is in front of you. The radar systems are sending out radar waves, and then they're receiving them back again to tell what's in front of you. There are pros and cons to both systems. Radar is more expensive. Generally speaking, radar is located in the front bumper, so if you're involved in a minor fender bender, it's more expensive to repair. But that's not all systems, like the new Ram 1500 and all the Volvos. The radar module is actually behind the windscreen, so it's much less expensive to repair in an accident. And camera-based systems can get a little bit confused in the fog or the rain or the snow, etc. If you can't see what's in front of you, the camera system is not going to be able to see it either. Let's see here. Most comfortable vehicle for a 7'4" person. Oh my, probably a pickup truck. It's basically going to be one of your only options in America. Ooh, pardon me here. When will we get our hands on the new Mazda 3? I actually already know that. We will look it up for you here. It's going to be in the next few months, so let's cover what's coming up soon, actually, while we're talking about this. So the next videos that you'll be seeing dropping on our channel will be the Kia Forte EX full drive, the Ford Ranger full drive. We also have upcoming a full drive on the Lexus UX and the Nissan Leaf. I have a lot of Kias actually with me right here. So like we have the Leaf that is in the office, we have a Lexus UX, and then I actually have my hands on the Kia Niro EV, incidentally at the same time as the Leaf, so expect a video on that. Then we'll have the Chicago Auto Show coming up, the Cadillac XT4, Accord Hybrid, Mazda CX-9, the new 2020 Toyota Corolla, the new 2020 Kia Soul, the Crosstrek Hybrid, and the Ram HD pickups. And then it looks like the Mazda event is probably going to be out in March sometime. So around March, you'll see the Corolla, or the new Mazda 3. Let's see here. On a price range, David is asking a price range of $35,000 to $45,000. What would you recommend for a fairly fun daily driver? No kids, Honda Acura fan, but like some Chevys too. Ooh, that's an interesting mix. Fairly fun daily driver. The Accord is an awful lot of fun. Let's go with what I would probably avoid. I would avoid the Acura TLX at the moment because the TLX is still getting the ZF9 speed, and it's just not as much fun as Honda and Acura's new 10-speed. So I would probably tend towards the Honda Accord with the 2-liter turbo and the 10-speed, or the Acura RDX with the 2-liter turbo and the 10-speed. Same engine, basically same transmission. The Acura is going to give you super handling all-wheel drive, but it's going to be a crossover, so maybe it's not quite as much fun as the Accord. If you got an Accord and you put wider summer tires on it, you would have a very, very fun machine, and it's also really quick, so they're surprisingly fast. Will you test the new Elantra GT N-Line? We sure will. Next up here, we're waiting for the RAV4 Hybrid review. Yes, we are definitely waiting for that. How come we haven't done a Chevy Traverse 2018 review? That is a very good question. I have been asking for a Traverse for ages and ages, and I don't know why we don't have one yet. I do know that we are finally going to be getting a GMC Terrain, however, because somehow we have not had one of those. There are a few vehicles that for some reason have never made it into the press fleet to review. For instance, the Lincoln Continental has never been available for review, and the Traverse has never been available. So who knows why? Can we comment on the reliability of Kias versus Toyotas given our preference for Kia cars? I want to buy a Stinger but worried about reliability. Pardon me there. That's a tricky question. If you go by the numbers, Kia has been posting very high reliability numbers. But Toyota also has a dedication to reliability. So that's a difficult question. Some have been claiming that, oh, it's not long-term reliability that's good with the Koreans, and we can't really say that because we can say, however, that the Koreans have made incredible strides in reliability. So if you look at long-term reliability metrics on Kia and Hyundai vehicles, long-term, they haven't been as good. But if you look at short-term reliability metrics, Kia has actually been beating many of the Japanese brands in terms of short-term reliability. Now, the answer here is not that, or at least I don't think that, based on what we've seen from the numbers, it does not appear to be that Kia is good for 3 years and then falls apart after 3 years. It's that Kia has been continually improving their reliability. And this actually goes for the entire Hyundai Kia Motor Group. They've been seriously improving their overall reliability over time. And that's why their short-term metrics are an improvement over their long-term metrics. Toyota has been at the reliability game a very, very long time. So if you're worried about absolute long-term reliability and you don't want to worry about being the one-off that's unreliable, Toyota is really the only company that doesn't seem to have any missteps here. So Honda has had long-term good reliability, but they are also a company that has occasional missteps. You know, they've had some issues with the CVTs, some issues with the old 2.4-liter engine and the older Honda CR-Vs, and they've had some issues with their new 1.5-liter turbo. The 9-speed automatic hasn't been exactly well received, and they had some transmission problems back with their older 5-speed automatic. But we don't really see that same occasional misstep from Toyota. They're definitely right on top of their reliability all the time. Now, there's some disadvantages to this, and this is, I think, the key here. The disadvantage to Toyota's reliability mantra, generally speaking, is that they're a company that does not go for the newest features right away. So, generally speaking, you won't find the brand new snazzy, really, really thought-provoking features in a Toyota vehicle first. Toyota prefers to wait a while to make sure that these features are reliable and that they can integrate them at a low cost and that they're profitable, etc. That's their goal. They seem to want to make sure that they're fully baked before they put them in the car. Whereas other car companies will go after those features right away, but then ultimately they may be a little bit less reliable as a result. So that's a little bit tricky right there. As far as the Stinger specifically, I don't have any specific reliability concerns. That 8-speed automatic transmission was an in-house design, but it's been around for some time. There really haven't been any problems with it. Same thing for the engine. It's been used in Hyundai and Genesis vehicles for some time, and I don't think that there's any particular reliability problem there. Let's see here. Does the new Passport really have that much less usable cargo space than the Pilot, even though it's only 6 inches shorter? I mean, it has about 6 inches less usable cargo space. So if the second row seats are down, that's really going to be the only difference. It's basically a 4-door, 2-row Pilot. I know there have been some people out there that said, oh my goodness, it's nothing like a 2-row Pilot. It's completely different. It is definitely a 2-row Pilot. And I actually don't think there's anything wrong with that. Honda was pretty upfront that it's basically a 2-row Pilot, and that's what people wanted, so that's what they're giving them. So there we go. Let's see here. Next up, we have, would you get a Honda Accord 2.0T or the Acura TLX? Let's see here. At the moment, I would probably get the Honda Accord 2.0T because it's a little bit newer, and I really like the new 2-liter turbo and the transmission. but no all-wheel drive, and that is a bit of a bummer. What's the car we like best while driving? Overall, probably just tops forever. Probably an M5. So there we go. Is Scotty Kilmer right about German versus American-built cars? I am not sure what Scotty Kilmer has said about that, so I cannot answer that question. Looking for an 8-seat crossover, please give your opinion. You do not have too many options, sadly, there. Some of the larger and more comfortable crossovers that truly seat 8 people are not very big. Let's put it this way. When you look at crossovers, the main ones that seat 8, Honda Pilot, Toyota Highlander, not on the large side of this particular segment. You can get an 8-row General Motors large crossover, but they're still not as large or as comfortable as a minivan inside. So I would actually say you should probably get a minivan. Let's see here. E-Class or Macan S. I would E-Class. I really like the E-Class interior. Mercedes has been a manufacturer that has really reinvented themselves lately. They went through this period where I really disliked the E-Class not that long ago. But the current E-Class is just gorgeous on the inside, so I would definitely E-Class. What do you think of the new 2019 Q3? That is a good question. We have not been able to drive it yet, but hopefully we will very soon. Let's see here. Are manufacturers updating their safety suite once you bring their car home? No. So that is the important thing to remember. When we're talking about most modern active safety systems, there are no updates after the vehicle leaves the factory. Things will work the way that they do from the factory right away, forever. That's how that works. Do you like the RDX infotainment system? Do I like it better than other infotainment systems? No. I'm a little torn on the new one. I don't know if I buy their logic in not putting a touchscreen or in their little finger controller thingy. Now, there's no question the finger controller is way easier to use than the Lexus touchpad thing. But I would probably say I would get iDrive or the Mercedes or MMI system before I did the Acura one, if I had the choice. But that said, the infotainment system is not the only selling point. There's the rest of the vehicle. And the rest of the vehicle, the RDX, is just simply a great buy in that segment. It's not terribly expensive compared to some of the alternatives, and the performance is absolutely excellent. So it's really hard to go wrong with that new RDX. Hello is asking thoughts on the Volkswagen Atlas. The Volkswagen Atlas is big, it's comfy, and it's family friendly. So there we go. Let's see here. Since you've been talking about headlights, would you recommend upgrading headlights from HID to LED? The ones I'm looking at are 6,000 lumens. I would say be careful when upgrading headlamps that you don't change the geometry of the reflectors, etc. So you don't want to get in trouble for having headlights that are not aimed properly, etc. So be careful when doing that one. Let's see here. Will we be reviewing the updated Range Rover Evoque? I have no children, so the space in the Velar won't be necessary. I do like the looks. Do you have an opinion on the double screens? Hopefully we will have the Range Rover Evoque soon, although I suspect, knowing Jaguar Land Rover, that it's going to be a while. Sometimes it takes a while for those vehicles to come out here. Bottom line would be on especially luxury vehicles like the Evoque, if you like the way it looks, then I would say go ahead and get it. The only downside to the Range Rover Evoque really is the transmission design, and that is something that we've seen in the last generation Evoque. It hasn't changed with this one. Some people like it, some people don't. Just be sure that you're really okay with the way that drives before you sign on the dotted line. The Velar doesn't have that same issue, so personally, I think that I would probably get the Velar over the Range Rover Evoque, but it's not quite the same thing. I also have to say that I would look really long and hard at the Volvo XC40 because I think it is a little bit more attractive in my personal head. And I also think that it's a better value than what we see in the Range Rover Evoque. So if you like it, go ahead and get it. There are some good alternatives, and definitely check out that Velar. Let's see here. What are your opinion on VW and Ford teaming up? We're definitely going to be seeing more of that over time. That is not a one-off thing, so expect to see more manufacturer tie-ups. Let's see here. Have I heard of the CRV oil dilution problem? Do you think it's a good buy, even worth the issue? I have heard of the issue. I don't know how prevalent the issue actually is. If you look at reliability metrics for the CRV, there are not very many engine problems on major reliability surveys. So um, I would say that that may not be a very prevalent problem. It's difficult to say. The one thing I will say is if you're hearing about these problems because you've been online and you're looking at forums and people saying, "Oh my goodness, my car fell apart," remember that online forums are where complaints go to collect. So if you have a problem, you go online, you complain about it, and that's a self-fulfilling prophecy because then you get to see all of the other people that are complaining about that problem. And remember that Honda is selling almost 400,000 CRVs every year. So I would say if this was a truly prevalent problem, we would really be hearing about it because 400,000 vehicles having that kind of a problem would be a ton. I would probably not be too concerned. Let's see here. Someone was asked, oops, the scrolling is going a little too fast here. Uh-oh. Someone's asking about a used Audi as a reliable means of transportation. Never buy a used luxury car as a reliable means of transportation. That's all I will say on that front. Any thoughts on Volkswagen's upcoming EVs? I will wait until we actually see their EVs in person to make any comment on that particular one. Someone is asking about the Honda Passport being a stopgap, giving Honda more time to redesign it to be more distinguished from the Pilot. I would doubt that. Expect the current Passport to live a pretty decent long life. So, based on their overall design cycles, you should probably expect to see the Ridgeline get a slight refresh here at some point, most likely. And then maybe at some point down the line, the Passport and Pilot will get a complete redesign. But for the Passport, it's going to be a while. And for the Pilot, that complete redesign, maybe in a few years. But it won't be both vehicles at the same time. Honda generally doesn't seem to do that. Even when vehicles are very, very closely related, they generally don't get the redesign at the same time. Let's see here. Genesis G80, that is a very exciting vehicle coming up. It'll be Genesis's first rear-wheel drive crossover, so we will be expecting that soon. Hopefully Genesis will have some of their dealer issues worked out by then. We'll find out. What other cars have good quality surround view cameras? I would say, generally speaking, the luxury car companies have the best surround view cameras. So BMWs, Mercedes, Volvo to some extent, Audi, of course, they're going to have the nicest, snazziest 360-degree cameras, and basically everybody else is pretty similar, and they all filter down in that lineup there, although most of them are actually quite good still. Traverse versus Enclave, which is more reliable? How can they stand up against the Japanese? Alan is asking. Alan, that is an interesting question. Traverse versus Enclave, they're going to be just about as reliable because they're really very similar. They're both General Motors vehicles. They are using basically the same parts, same engines, etc., transmissions. So reliability is going to be very equal. It's going to depend on the options that you select in each particular model. Can they stand up against the Japanese? Now this is a different question. And pardon my cold here, which I'm still trying to get over. Reliability is a tricky subject for some people to talk about. But look at it this way. By the numbers, no, the General Motors vehicle is probably not going to be as reliable as the Toyota vehicle, but it is probably going to be less expensive long term. And the longer you keep the vehicle, the greater this delta may be, depending on exactly what you're looking at. The exceptions here would be something like a Highlander hybrid. So if you're looking at the Buick Enclave versus a Highlander hybrid, operating costs of the Highlander hybrid are going to be so low, it's probably going to be less expensive all the way around. But just regular Highlander, or regular Pilot versus a regular GMC Acadia, or an Enclave, Buick Enclave, the General Motors vehicle is going to be less expensive. And so even if it's less reliable long term, will you ever approach that delta in unreliability? And the answer, generally speaking, is no for most people, especially the amount of time that most Americans tend to own their cars. So if you say, you know, my Buick is going to cost me an extra $1,000 in maintenance over its lifetime, then you have to ask the question, is that at least $1,000 less expensive than the Honda or the Toyota? Generally speaking, the answer would be yes. So generally speaking, it would still be less expensive to keep around. So that's my thought there. It gets a little bit different with pickup trucks, as I've said before. Like pickup trucks, the American pickup trucks may be a little bit less reliable than the Toyota pickup truck, but they're so much less expensive to buy and so much more fuel efficient that honestly, they're just going to be cheaper all the way around. New RAV4, new Wrangler. That is a weird, weird cross match there. Interesting. RAV4 versus Wrangler. If you want to go off road, Wrangler. If you don't want to go off road, RAV4. We'll be testing the new 2020 Ford Explorer soon. I'm not sure. Ford doesn't invite us to too many events, but there's always hope. The more people that subscribe down there, by the way, that will definitely help there. Been asking for a review of the Audi A4. Yes, we have been asking for a review of the Audi A4 as well, and we have practically received every other Audi except for the A4, but we will keep asking, fear not. Which EV between the Kia Niro, I'm guessing he meant Niro EV, and the Tesla Model 3 do you see coming? Which EV between... I'm not exactly sure what this person is asking. Sorry about that. Let's see here. How much is the new Rivian going to be? Expect $90,000 to $100,000, somewhere there. Review coming for the Chevy Blazer. I am not supposed to say anything about that, but logically you could expect something coming soon. So, sort of, yes. How is the lady with 1 million mile Elantra 4-cylinder possible? That doesn't surprise me, actually, because as I've said before, Kia and Hyundai actually don't have bad reliability ratings, so that seems perfectly plausible. Chevy Blazer, you mean Equinox? No, I think they meant Chevy Blazer. What vehicle would you recommend a couple with 2 kids, safety tech under $20,000? How old are these children, I guess would be the question. Are they in child seats yet, etc.? Any of the mainline smaller crossovers are very, very good here. Around $20,000, I would say probably look at something like a Honda Civic, which I really like, or the Hyundai Ioniq. Now, the Ioniq may be a little bit more expensive, but it's going to save you fuel in the long term, so if you're looking for that, that would be a good option. If not, I would say you could probably get a base or a nearly base Honda Civic that would be a good long-term buy for around that price. Let's see here. Blazer is what the older Equinox was before this new smaller body. Not quite. The Blazer is a 2-row Traverse, for lack of a better understanding. So it's wider than the previous generation Equinox was. What is my take on Electrify America? Is there any competition for Tesla's supercharger network? That's an interesting question. Electrify America seems to be... What's the best way of saying this? They just seem to be just sort of another EV charging network here. There doesn't really seem to be a drive to match what's going on with the Tesla supercharger network. The supercharger network is one company laying out a network on a map of the US and going, this is where we think the charging stations should be. And all the other superchargers, all the other DC fast chargers in America are just companies, individual companies, putting chargers out there where they think they're going to make money, where they think they're actually going to be used, that sort of thing. And that's a different model. And that's why in any given metro area, generally speaking, especially California, you are going to find far more CHAdeMO or SAE fast charge stations and charge connectors than supercharge connectors. Like in the Bay Area, there are just simply more DC fast chargers that are not on the Tesla network than are on the Tesla network. But Where Tesla has the real advantage here is if you want to drive from Washington State to New York State, for instance, and you don't want to go through Colorado, because who would? That's kind of silly, and you wanted to do it in an electric car, you could do it in a Tesla, but you couldn't do it in anything else, because up there in the upper part of the US, there just aren't any charging stations along those stretches of the interstate. There are very few electric cars there, so it doesn't really make financial sense to have electric vehicle chargers in those locations. But Tesla has decided to put chargers there so that way people from out of state can use those charging stations to drive through the state. And therefore, that's really the marvel with Tesla's supercharger network, is the location of the stations. There's also, there's the ease of use of the stations, unquestionably, but nothing is technologically that superior in Tesla's charging stations. It's really the location. Let's see here. Of all the cars, what's the quietest affordable car that we have tested? Quietest affordable car. I guess it would depend on your definition of affordable. The new Ram pickup trucks were very quiet. Buick tends to have very, very quiet vehicles. I would say just above that sort of mainstream segment, Buick is probably going to have some of the quietest vehicles available here. Why do you think Honda sales have crashed in America? Actually, Honda hasn't been too bad, really. Honda sales definitely, I think, reflect the overall trends in America towards some larger SUVs, more off-road capable things, and of course pickup trucks, and away from more traditional sedans, which is where Honda really has a lot of vehicles. But Honda's vehicles, sedan sales actually have been okay, so I can't complain too much there. Let's see here. Reviewers take off safety features to autonomous braking. However, almost no one tests them. Why is this? Are they all the same? That's mainly because testing autonomous braking systems is tricky. I would need one of those autonomous vehicle balloons, and we would need to try and create some sort of standardized testing procedure from this. I think that we're better leaving that particular testing to the experts. So the Institute for Highway Safety, for instance, they do autonomous vehicle testing. Autonomous safety system testing, and so I would recommend that you go and view their testing results on those systems. You're just going to be getting, quite simply, the best data available. Time to upgrade the internet. Oh, is it lagging? I am sorry about that. Like I said, we are doing this on an iPad because my usual bauble for connecting the cameras to this widget right here, that was not working. So this is all on an iPad, on the Wi-Fi, and even though I am in Silicon Valley and my Comcast bill is fantastically large, because we do have 100 megabits a second up here, that does not always guarantee a good connection to the YouTubes. Will Subaru add turbos to the Forester or Crosstrek? I'm going to go with probably not. The reason is, if you go back earlier in this video, we're talking about corporate average fuel economy and how it works with different car companies. One of the biggest things that people don't realize is smaller companies and companies that are focused on certain attributes like pickup trucks or large SUVs or all-wheel drive in the case of Subaru. Fuel economy is very important. Corporate average fuel economy numbers are very important. So if you were to try and make performance vehicles or higher performance vehicles that got lower fuel economy, then you're in risk of not meeting your corporate average fuel economy numbers. And for a small volume company like BMW that's selling high profit, high dollar amount luxury vehicles, that's not a problem. But for a company like Mazda or Subaru, or some of these other smaller mainstream car companies, that is definitely a problem. So corporate average fuel economy numbers are the reason that we see Hyundai Kia Motor Group, for instance, releasing new continuously variable transmissions. They're the reason that we now have Hyundai and Kia vehicles that are electric, sold in more than just California. For instance, the new Niro is going to be sold in Texas and Georgia and other states like that, because they have to bump up their fuel economy ratings. Now, Mazda and Subaru are going in kind of a slightly different direction. Instead of electrifying or hybridizing things to try and raise the average fuel economy up, so that way they can still have vehicles that get lower fuel economy. Mazda and Subaru are trying to make everything more fuel efficient. So that way, if everything is up there and qualifies in its own right, then there is no need to create electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles or plug-in hybrid vehicles until they're absolutely required, because the profit margin is lower. So it's all quite a logical financial play here. So with Subaru, don't expect many high-performance vehicles. They're going to keep the STI and the WRX, etc., around for a while, but don't expect a turbocharged regular Impreza. Don't expect a turbocharged Crosstrek or anything like that anytime soon, unless the corporate average fuel economy numbers and those incentives change. Do we see another manufacturer coming out with a hybrid minivan to compete with the Pacifica? There are always rumors, but we haven't really seen anything concrete. Honda has a hybrid minivan that's always seeming to be in development for the US market, but so far we really haven't seen anything. Speaking of reliability, how are the new Alfa Romeos doing, like the Stelvio? Tricky question. If you're looking at a Stelvio Quadrifoglio, then the overall reliability hasn't been particularly great. If you're looking at a Stelvio TI, reliability has been sort of below average for the mainstream, maybe a little bit below average for the luxury car segment. So, with reliability, the Stelvio may not leave you stranded, but it may have some funky electrical issues, may have some infotainment issues, things like that. Reliability overall has gotten better over time, so it's not going to be as unreliable as a luxury car was in the 1980s, but it's not going to be as reliable as a Lexus. Do you know if the Honda Civic hatch will be refreshed soon? Time to get rid of the fake scoops. It's unlikely, so we may see some very mild refreshes, probably in about maybe 1 to 2 years here somewhere, but definitely not for 2020. What do we have here? Can you provide your most anticipated EV that is close to a Model 3? We don't have one. Nobody else really seems to be creating anything quite along those lines. However, the closest to the Tesla lineup that we'll see next, they're probably going to be coming from Porsche with their Taycan and their other EVs that are coming. Those are going to be on the luxury side. As far as more mainstream vehicles, we may be seeing something from Polestar, the Volvo subsidiary, but that's also probably going to be on the slightly more expensive side as well. We will know more details probably soon. But on the mainstream side, from average everyday companies, we're going to be seeing those from the Hyundai Kia Motor Group, from Ford, obviously, Volkswagen. General Motors has been promising more vehicles based on what we see in the Bolt, etc. Let's see here. Let's try and run through the questions because we're running out of time here. Let's see here. What else have we? GLS and GLE, please. Yes, I'm definitely trying hard to get the new GLE. It looks very tasty. And of course, the Lincoln Aviator. Really excited about the new Aviator. I'm really excited actually about all the new Lincoln products. Because Lincoln seems to be going in a very different direction from Cadillac now, which I appreciate. I really liked what Cadillac was doing with their sedans, and for the longest time I thought, gosh, I really wish Lincoln was doing this with their sedans. But then, for some reason, Lincoln decided to do sort of a switcheroo with Cadillac when it came to crossovers, and they're doing what I think is the right thing with their new crossovers, and Cadillac is going in kind of an odd direction with the XT5 and the new XT6 versus what Lincoln is doing with their new crossovers there. What is your favorite non-Tesla EV currently? I would say I have a love-hate relationship in a way with the Jaguar I-Pace. I loved the way that it drove. I love the way that it looks. It is absolutely gorgeous. But I would say that the overall efficiency rating was disappointing. We should be driving the new upcoming e-tron from Audi. That should also be very tasty. And then, of course, we're going to have the new Mercedes electric vehicles coming very soon. And expect some BMW electric vehicles also. But as far as favorite non-Tesla, if you want to spend the cash, I would say it would be the Jaguar I-Pace. And if you don't want to spend the cash, that is a tricky question. I would probably be inclined to one of the Hyundai Kia Motor Group EVs, but I don't know exactly which one off the top of my head. I'd have to think on that. Do you think we will see a plug-in hybrid Santa Fe or a hybrid Santa Fe? The rumor mill is definitely telling us yes, that we will definitely see that. Let's see here. Which all-wheel drive system do you feel is the best? Audi, Subaru, super handling, all-wheel drive, Quattro, etc. That is a tricky question. And we've talked about this a little bit before. Quattro, let me back up there. Quattro on A4, A5, A6, A7, A8, and Q5, Q7, etc. on the top end. That version of Quattro, BMW's xDrive, and the Mercedes 4MATIC system, they're all essentially the same in operational concept. The only difference is that Audi puts the transfer case in the transmission case. The two things are actually jammed into the same physical enclosure, but other than that, they operate exactly the same. They send the majority of the power to the rear, they will send power up to the front when needed. Sometimes they will have a torque vectoring rear axle depending on the model that you're looking at. Generally speaking, those are going to be more dynamic than the front-wheel drive systems because they can send more power to the rear axle whenever they want to. They just disconnect the front, 100% can go to the rear. Now, some of those systems, if they have a true center differential, maybe they can't completely disconnect the front, but they can still send the vast majority of power to the rear axle. That's going to give you the best handling. Something like super handling all-wheel drive sometimes can send more than 50% of engine power to the rear axle, but it's not going to be all the time. So it's not going to have the same feeling as those next level systems. But it is going to be a lot closer than the Subaru all-wheel drive system or any of those competitors. So that's really the theory there. Do you think Honda will give the Ridgeline a much-needed cosmetic refresh? I don't think so, because they seem to like the way that vehicle looks right there. Let's see here. Does the new Passport still have the lesser than 20 mile per hour partial Honda sensing, or is it equal to the Civic with full Honda sensing now? It is my understanding, although don't hold me to this one, that the Passport and the Pilot have the full Honda sensing system. And on the I'm getting myself confused here. No, Passport has full Honda sensing, exactly the same system. I thought you were talking about Ridgeline. No, Honda Pilot and Passport do have basically the same Honda sensing system as the rest of the Honda lineup now. It's the collision mitigating braking, same thing that we see in the Acura lineup and have for some time. Real question here: cookies or brownies? Cookies, probably. That would definitely be the cookie thing. Let's see here. Thinking getting a new Passport or RAV4 in 4 months. Which do you recommend between the two? That's kind of an interesting cross shop there, Passport or RAV4. They're quite different in size, so I'm intrigued why you're looking at those two. I like the way the RAV4 looks, and I like the overall package. I have to say, I also like the price tag, so I probably would go RAV4 in my head at any rate. Let's see here. Favorite Hyundai Kia Genesis product? Good question. That would probably be between the G70 and the Stinger. There we go. Passport versus the Subaru Forester. Again, not the same size vehicle because the Forester is notably smaller than the Passport. Any idea what month the 2020 Outback might be available from Subaru? We do not know yet, but I'm sure we will start to hear something probably over the next month or two. Interesting, the new Explorer will be built on a rear-wheel drive platform, and presumably sporty will XT4, XT6 are on front-wheel drive platforms. Yes, that was kind of an unexpected shift in some circles. Now, there have been a lot of rumors about Ford moving to a rear-wheel drive platform, but honestly, I didn't actually believe many of them until we really were starting to see concrete proof, because that's just not the way that any of these segments have been moving. But I really have to applaud Ford for doing that, because it is something that I prefer. Now, there's going to be an unfortunate side effect of that, is that the Explorer and the upcoming Aviator are not going to be as space efficient as they were before. So it's really noticeable when you look at the Explorer that the cargo area is not as big, and that's unfortunate. But the driving dynamics are definitely going to be better. For the people that are complaining about lag, I have to say I'm really sorry about that. Again, we are not sure what is going on there, so out of our control. I hate to say that. Nice to see a beautiful place after a long week. Oh, thanks. What do you recommend? The Kona EV? Yes, we do. I do like the Kona EV, although I think the whole headlamp thing is a little bit funny. If you've noticed, Hyundai and Kia have suddenly been channeling their inner Jeep Cherokee, and they've been separating the headlamps and the fog lamps and the turn signals, etc. on the front. It's kind of funny there. I'm not a huge fan of that particular look. When is Mitsubishi refreshing the Outlander with the newer engine? It already received an engine tweak for 2019. It's not going to change the overall nature of the vehicle much, so keep that in mind when looking at our previous review of it. If I had to own a muscle car for a relatively livable daily driver, what would be our choice? Would you have a better alternative? I would be pretty torn between the Challenger and the Mustang. I like the Mustang's turbo engine, and I like the 10-speed automatic. I also, the V8 is lovely as well with the 10-speed. It's a little bit more expensive. I think the sweet spot for the Mustang for the practical shopper is the 2.3 turbo. It has a very BMW-like feel, to be perfectly honest, when it's equipped with the small turbo and that 10-speed. The V8 tends to give it more of a muscle car vibe with a slightly heavier front end. Fun to drive, not quite as comfortable as the FCA vehicle. If you were looking for the comfy cruiser, then I would definitely get the Dodge. And the Dodge, of course, you can get that 6.4 liter V8, which sounds incredible. And the fuel economy is not too bad. It's not going to handle like the Mustang, but it's going to be more of that classic muscle car vibe. Why doesn't Lexus have any plug-in hybrids? That's easy, because Lexus doesn't need any plug-in hybrids. They have all of their credits needed for compliance for CAFE and for ZEV, as far as we know, in California. So you won't really be seeing any EVs from them until they absolutely have to. So that's how that works. So your car manufacturer saying they would like to go electric. What do you think the solution to quick charging will be, like 20 minutes or less? There's not going to be a lot that you could do 20 minutes or less. Remember, that's a lot of power to be trying to jam in a battery that rapidly. So while we will be seeing much higher output chargers, I don't know I don't think that we're going to see anything coming on the scene that's really going to reduce the total 0 to 100 or 0 to 80 window too much shorter than it already is now. Let's see here. Someone is asking about the Stinger, worried about reliability. Would you think it'd last 200,000 miles? I would not be worried at all with the Stinger on 200,000 miles. It has a 100,000 mile powertrain warranty. Kia actually has been beating many of the other established brands when it comes to reliability. They're definitely tops in short-term reliability. I wouldn't really have any problem with that. Let's see here. What are your thoughts on the 2019 Mazda CX-5 Signature? Which would you purchase? I really liked the CX-5 Signature more than I thought. I was a little bit disappointed in some ways with the Mazda 6 Signature, but none of my complaints, in a way, with the Signature Mazda 6 translated into the CX-5. And a lot of it has to do with competition. So nobody else in that segment is producing a high horsepower, high performance option like that Mazda. Overall handling performance, I think, was a little bit disappointing for where I wanted it to be, but you could fix that aftermarket. So I would probably get the CX-5 over just about anything else in that particular segment. The turbocharged engine is great, it's responsive, it's fun to drive, and you could stick wider tires on it and fix the handling. So that's pretty much it there. And let's try and get our last question here before we close out here. Best adaptive cruise for large SUV for San Mateo Dumbarton Bridge commute. Best adaptive cruise. For that segment, I would steer away from the Honda. I don't think it's not as smooth as some of the other systems. Toyota's system is pretty smooth. The Hyundai Kia systems are good. So is FCA's new system. The Ford system is good. That's a tricky one. The best adaptive cruise control systems would be found in luxury segment vehicles. So your Mercedes, your BMW, your Audi, etc., they're going to give you the best overall performance when it comes to the actual operation of the adaptive cruise control system. But as far as mainstream vehicles go, most are fairly similar, but again, the Honda system is just not quite as smooth as many of them. So with that, I am afraid that I will have to sign out here because it is getting a little bit late. So be sure and stay tuned. Hopefully we will try and do these live video sessions more often. We had been doing them over on Facebook.com. We're actually going to be moving them right over here to YouTube instead. So with that out of the way, I will see everybody later, and be sure and stay tuned because we should have